I think I'm going to start with this microphone, and I might move to that one in a few minutes. Thank you very much to everybody who helped. Learnship was a startup. I don't think we can call ourselves that anymore. We were founded in 2008 in Cologne, in Germany, and we've grown a lot since then. Humble beginnings in 2008. We now have more than 200 employees. We have offices obviously in Cologne. We're in Paris, here in France. We operate in Switzerland, and we've been in Chicago for a couple of years, and are learning quite a lot now about how to localize language and communication services, because of course people differ as you move geographically. And I think that impacts everybody who works in learning and training on a global scale. So that's what I want to talk about today. When I talk about the segment, what segment am I talking about? This is the B2B language and communication training segment. Learnship got on its feet really in Germany with the Mittelstand kind of company. That's a medium-sized firm. It's often family-owned. Some of these guys are real giants in their industry, and you may not have heard of them. But they are very enthusiastic investors in language and communication training, and we're very thankful to them for getting us on our feet. So, business language coaching online. And that's a brief agenda for today. So I'd like to talk a little bit about design thinking. When you create a new product, and I'll use the word product, this is actually a service industry, I know, but when we talk about curriculum, we talk about methodology, trainer choice, positioning and things like that, it is sort of product development, and I want to talk about it from that angle. I want to go back to 1976 and an academic called Wilkins, and I'll talk briefly about two kinds of syllabus. And that's relevant in ways I hope to explain. I want to talk briefly about the common European framework, the distinction between training and coaching, a little bit about ESP, that's English for specific purposes, and soft skills, and then finally methodology. And the framework of all of this, remember, Learnship exists, and this is probably important as well. It's a full service provider in the sense that we have 850 freelance language trainers working for us. We have our own academy. We observe lessons, we provide professional development. The big investment in the company from the beginning was the virtual classroom. And instead of going for self-paced learning, 99% of what we do is trainer-led. We're huge believers in human beings. We're big believers in qualified language trainers. We're big believers in a solid curriculum, methodology, and all of the things that make education and training work. Where digital tools are used is to support the trainer, not to replace the trainer. I think that's important. And the leaders in the segment I was talking about tend to be traditional face-to-face providers who are capable of quite a lot of agility in terms of curriculum and so on, and sophistication in sort of niche training. That when you're doing this on large scale and you're doing it globally, you know, it raises all kinds of questions about how do we do this and keep quality but also scale it and so on. Okay, I find this to be a useful way of seeing all of this. The design thinking steps, and maybe I'll just talk through it very briefly. How do I approach the challenge? How do I interpret my findings? What do we create? How do I build my idea? How do I prove and improve the idea? So this is obviously a cycle. We're still working on this product, but it is launched, and it's actually going quite well. So what was the challenge? The challenge was, in the beginning, we were working with course books. We were working with quite detailed curricula in terms of language learning objectives. We were dealing with large cohorts needing to benchmark performance, and with fixed assessments halfway through the course and at the end of the course. But what was coming back to us through client feedback and also anecdotally through trainers was that this is cool and this is good and this works for a lot of our learners. It doesn't work for everybody. We need something a little bit more free. We need something a little bit more agile. We need something that goes in the direction of communication skills towards what you may call soft skills, or at least a subset of what is commonly known as soft skills in the L&D world. In short, we need a program which is less curriculum-driven, less prescriptivist. And how are you guys going to deliver that online at a good quality level globally. So that was the challenge. How do we interpret the findings? So what we've had to do, obviously, was firstly get to know very well in detail what we were originally offering, which felt like just normal language training to us. We hadn't thought about the various kind of distinctions and making it so clear that you'd be able to explain to anybody, a non-specialist, an HR person, somebody from the IT department who wants to understand why a certain landing page has to be like that, or why certain material should be available. If you don't have good answers to those questions in simple terms, you don't understand it, and that's what we learned. So it was an interesting experience. What did we create? I'll get onto that. How did we build the idea? And at the end, how do you prove and improve? What kinds of feedback are you collecting, and how do you act on them? And how not to sort of knee-jerk react to the most charismatic or insistent complaints. But let's get back to what is the distinction between this language coaching product and a language training product, because I think that's important. And I think you actually have to go back to the 76, I think it was Wilkins, who distinguished between type A and type B syllabuses, thanks to Shona White and her blog for bringing my attention to this quite recently. But it encapsulated the discussions we had behind the scenes at LearnShip when we were coming up with the product. So if you look here, this is a type A syllabus. You may be familiar with this from sort of various popular course books where there's a sequence of language items which are presented. Maybe the present perfect comes in at A2, and some teachers say, well, it should only come at B1. And some other guys are saying, well, my A1s can handle it. There is no natural sequence, actually, for this. Well, that's what linguists will tell you. But the course books do include a sequence, and people learn these things so you would know on Tuesday, the 17th of March, more or less, what pre-selected target language is going to be covered in that class. Okay, this is type A syllabus. It's external to the learner. That decision is made by the training organization. And there's a little bit of give and take on the day. You might spend more on a role play or less time on a role play, more time on a setup. You may answer a ad hoc question. You may engage a little bit in anecdotes about the weekend or something somebody remembers. But that day is about use of the present perfect, for example, to talk about giving status on a project, and that's how it is. Type A syllabus. And that's what we were doing at LearnShip successfully until 2016, when we started to think we needed to add on that. We needed to do something else in addition. And that brings me to the type B syllabus. And that's, you hear a lot about the personalized syllabus, you hear about adaptable syllabi, and that's because the technology is available now to see how somebody is doing and then suggest a learning path. But of course, that's been happening manually by human teachers for years and years and years. But it means, obviously, that the teachers have to have quite a lot of freedom over the curricular objectives and what they're doing in class on that day. And there's all kinds of things that work against this. I mean, if you look at Britain, if you look at the public education system or the government education system there, when you have these inspectors asking for these detailed lesson plans in advance and things like that, so the teacher doesn't have that much control anymore. A type B syllabus could go anywhere, and nobody can really predict, I guess, where it's going to go. And that's what we wanted for the business language coaching product. Okay. Internal to the learner, negotiated between learners and teachers. My take on all of this is neither is actually inherently superior to the other. I think that they fit certain groups of people in different ways. One of the reasons is, of course, that people are quite allergic to explicit grammar instruction, but many people actually need that, I think. And if they're following a coaching product, they may well not attend to the weaknesses that they really have, whereas if you need large groups of people to get to a certain level on the Common European Framework or something, it may be better to lean back towards a type A syllabus. But as I say, these are archetypes, these are extremes. The Common European Framework is an interesting document. What it says here is that it was created actually for language to be used in communication. What's important about the Common European Framework is that it actually does not include things like grammar items. It's basically a functional outcomes-driven document. People have tried to fill that gap subsequently with these things, these reference level descriptions which are emerging. And there's a bunch of these which are being created by third parties, and then they get approved and they get listed here on this, which is quite interesting. What I find interesting is that language schools often haven't gone too deeply into this, and they're using type A syllabi. They're using type B syllabi. Then they have a mix of both. They're not quite sure where the outcomes come from. And it all matters when you're building the product and when you're arguing for return on investment. What are you doing in class and why are you doing it? Training and coaching, and this is a hotbed. When we named the product, and just using the word coaching set off all kinds of discussion. What is coaching? Many people seem to believe that it sort of touched on emotional development or the affective plane and things like that, and it went in the direction of psychology or soft skills training. Other people simply thought it's type B syllabus teaching. It's what do we would take, let's say, a task. Convince me that this way of doing something is better than another way of doing something. You prepare yourself for the role play card, you start speaking, and I will give you feedback on the task performance, and I'll give you feedback on the language performance. And it's a kind of diagnostic, like a doctor does. He finds out what's wrong with you and he prescribes the cure. He doesn't know what's wrong with you before you've done the task or before he's done the diagnosis. In the room here, hands up, do people find this satisfactory as a distinction between training and coaching? Are you happy with the distinction? I've never been in a room in my life where people have agreed. I'm wondering if I'm in one now. Okay. ESP versus soft skills. This is another important area. If we work, for example, with a German automotive firm, and people work in very specific areas. They work in areas like chassis manufacture and logistics. That's very, very specific. Should this be a training course? Should this be a coaching course? Or is this another beast completely? What we did is actually exactly that. We separated it out into 3 different products. And what we found sometimes is that you can supplement a training course with a coaching course and so on. I started digging into this, into the academic literature. And I found something quite interesting. I like this paper, by the way. This is Williams and Swales. 2 halves of a single profession. Current concerns of shared interest in communication studies and ESP. This is British Council 2015. There's no doubt that communication studies and language 2 ESP are regarded as 2 separate professions, but changing attitudes in recent years require us to reconsider this compartmentalization. Okay? And the second part here, engineers, scientists, managers, doctors, and so on are concerned about the quality of communication in their fields. ESP is not only knowing the technical vocabulary for chassis production or how to conduct a certain procedure in neurosurgery. It's also how to communicate with the colleagues that you have around you, with the clients, and so on. A lot of that's happening on the phone. It's happening in meetings. You're negotiating. You're on the. These are classic ELT areas. Okay. So, and now I'm going to come to methodology, and then I'll hope to put it all back together and tell you about the business language coaching product that emerged. Task-based learning, and this is from the British Council Teaching English, is a direction we went with business language coaching. We also do it with our ESP courses. The reason here, if you can see the first line, the students are free of language control. What's also very, very important here is that it's a communicative approach. They spend a lot of time communicating during tasks. What we find is that there's a lot of discussion around methodology. Methodology kind of shifts and mutates and changes. You've had the communicative approach, which has been broadly in place since the 70s. And then you've got sort of, I don't know, different attention or emphasis played on different parts of the class. What we found with business language coaching at the end of the day was that almost devoting 70% of the class to the task was the happiest mix. That's where people wanted to be. Before I get there, let's come back to the design thinking. So if I take you back to 2015, we had a successful product. We had successful clients. We were offering more or less a PPP approach, that present, practice, produce. I would introduce the present perfect. You would do some gap fills and matching, and at the end, you'd do a little role play. Classic PPP, following the curriculum, following the Common European Framework outcomes. Some people saying this is a bit like a straitjacket, I don't have enough freedom, what can you do for me? If we had said as a blanket, let's say to 850 trainers, do as you wish, read the situation as it comes to you, you would find, again, an inability, I think, to benchmark and to be able to show the ROI, and you'd have to track things a lot more regularly. So what we came up with was business language coaching. We created a range of materials as well. So we used frameworks. I don't know if anybody's ever used frameworks before. Some of them you may be familiar with, like a SWOT diagram, things like that, which would give the curriculum some kind of structure within which you would have freedom. Okay, and combination of frameworks with case studies. So we got some third-party case studies from the Said Business School in Oxford, some from MIT, some great case studies, and we created our own case studies. We actually wrote 55 case studies, language graded all the way from A1 all the way up to C1, so A2 to C1, in the fields of automotive, financial, and so on. And we used authentic articles, emails from work, and we launched this. We did a pilot initially. This was 2016. We did 50 courses. And there was a big, big take-up. What we found, the group that liked it the most were software developers. There was a huge group of software developers. They were from Asia. They were working in the States on the West Coast. These guys needed to be able to speak in their field. So not just a mastery of the IT knowledge, they had that. But how do you respond, with irony and nuance, or at least command the room without an amusing accent and so on? Because these guys wanted to rise in their fields. They don't want to be an end-of-the-line developer forever. They want to be a product owner. And that really it was pay dirt for us in a sense. In Germany, what we found, and this is probably to do with local cultures, that business language training was very, very successful. We had many, many renewals directly, and people were happy to invest 5 years, 10 years of their lives in language learning. They would go all the way through the Common European Framework, step by step. What we found in the States was quite different. People really wanted this coaching, they want the personalization, they want the customization. Now, there are people more and more when I walk around events like this, and they talk about software which can do this, which will, firstly you get a needs analysis when you log into the platform, and then there's a kind of content tagging system, and the system will produce exercises appropriate to your needs. And personally, and I'm going to be speaking tomorrow actually here as well at 12 o'clock about the human being and why the most advanced artificial intelligence software will never do this satisfactorily, and why Learnship invested in trainers in the 2-day induction program, in the continuing professional development, in the production of all of this material, and actually now the translation of all of this material from English into German, into French and Spanish. Because it works, and because this is the only way you're going to localize effectively, and it's because people will come back, they come back to you. Companies are always looking to save money, this is clear, and they want to train more and more people. It's expensive to pay human teachers, and everybody's trying to get around that. But the fact is, this sort of need, which we identified as the challenge, which is the real personalization, this is for often executive level people, what they call the C-suite, or very specialist technical people. There is no satisfactory self-paced solution at this stage. And so that's basically, that's the product diversification story of Learnship at the moment. And it will continue to evolve and change. We're also in the process of launching intercultural training. We have a talk coming up about that as well. My colleagues are actually here. If you're interested in the company and would like to talk to them more. I think a note I'd like to leave you on just before maybe we could do some Q&A, because I think it's quite nice to have a more interactive kind of discussion. Maybe I've been moving around the point, would be that my observation would be to be successful in education technology in this digital field, it is critically important to have these pedagogical discussions and to have them in full. If you disagree about curriculum, if you disagree about assessment, if you disagree about what works, that has to be discussed, thrashed out before you get to the stage of creating products, before you get to the stage of developing any software. And I think part of Learnship's success so far, and I think what will underpin our success going forward, is the fact that we've managed the very difficult interface, I believe. Having teachers talking to software developers, talking to marketing people, talking to salespeople, talking to people making the strategic decisions about acquisitions and so on. These are very different people. They speak very, very different languages. This product development journey went all the way through landing pages. It went through pricing. It went through positioning. It's like, will people understand the difference? Rob, nobody wants to read these academic papers. Can you condense it into, 100 words for LinkedIn is ideal. I think for Twitter it's far fewer. What can I, how can I explain it to somebody who isn't convinced of the difference between the product? Why should they pay more? This is all very, very important. And what I find actually very funny and ironic about all of this, it required massive patience and I would say communication skills within the company to produce a communication solution that works. So yeah, as I said before I started, this was partly case study, this was partly personal narrative, and this is partly introducing you to LearnShip, which is a company I love. I've been there 4 years now, and I'm very excited about working there. But it was not supposed to be me sharing solutions. I wanted to show you almost inside the thought process. So if it feels open-ended, it is open-ended. I think this is an ongoing dialogue. And sort of on that note, I'd like to hand over if there are any questions from anybody.
It won't be in French. But look, can I ask...
Pleased to hear it.
Hey, what have you found to be some of the more useful ways of getting people interacting and actually sort of opening up in a virtual classroom itself?
Alex, I think one of the very important things is to have motivated, committed trainers who buy into what's supposed to be happening there. And I think that goes to a deep-seated belief that I have that if digital training providers are going to have trainer-led sessions, that they have to have a collegial and respectful relationship with the trainers who work for them. I think that has to be high touch. I think that has to go both ways. We have to have trainer feedback systems. We need to support the trainers. The materials have to be good. I think the classroom performance has to be good. So these are all the technical things that the video and audio has to be so seamless that you're not thinking about it. And then I think humans will bond with each other. They do it, we've seen that. I mean, one of the advantages, and I didn't get to it earlier, is for example, you could have your trainer in Berlin, but you're in Lyon, But that guy's just really, really clued up on ESP for logistics. We can match you through the classroom, but the only way that's going to work is if we can approach the relationship that you might have in a traditional classroom. So I hope that answers your question. I think it's partly technical, but I think it's partly investment in solid, respectful administrative procedures so that you've actually got a large group of people who want to work with you and are just waiting for new classes to come up, I think that's part of the answer. And I think that the coaching thing helps as well, because when you're working through a more prescriptive curriculum, there's probably less space for the co-construction of knowledge, between the trainer and the learner. So I think that the coaching product has created actually quite deep relationships, and what we saw during the pilot, and I didn't get to that, I probably should have if I had been more linear in my approach, was that we got a number of renewals. And when people asked for renewals, they actually asked for that specific person to teach them again, which raises all kinds of scheduling questions. And then you have to think, how much does it cost for us actually to take that person off something else, to make them available? How much do we indulge that relationship between the two, because it is important, and all of the other sort of operational thinking around making something efficient and profitable. So it comes down to, I think, having a shared understanding of what you're trying to achieve across the operational, pedagogical, commercial lines in the company. Yeah, and that being an open-ended discussion that never ends.